let's get stuck into some nitty-gritty questions, Kim.
Did you take a really big breath before your presentation?
Yeah, sorry. I knew I'd made it too big. But there's a lot to go through, and I do hope it was relevant to you. Yeah. There's a lot in this space, and there's a lot of people all offering silver bullet solutions in social media. And I think it's really important to have an understanding of the holistic landscape before you make a decision, and an understanding of your own strategy. So there is a lot to cover, but if you're interested in learning more, there's really good online courses, I'm sure, and there's a lot of information out there. So this was a very kind of, hey, you should be aware of all this, but I strongly recommend learning as much as you possibly can if it interests you. Yeah.
Excellent. So Tom, in terms of your own business, so do you actively kind of generate leads for yourself? Do you have a lot of people coming to you in terms of the advice that you can give? Or is it a case of, do you seek out these types of clients to think, oh, this person actually needs that? So how do you approach kind of your own lead generation process?
Lead generation is an interesting one, because I started in sales and I hated it but I knew to be a good marketer, I had to have a good understanding of sales. That was a really good piece of advice I got. But as you can probably tell, I'm not too comfortable with selling. And what I've quickly found is the best leads come from your current clients. All my clients over the months increase their retainer because we deliver good work. So it's much easier to keep your clients in services. Obviously, in products a little bit different. But word of mouth in lead generation, I know it's the worst thing to hear when you're struggling for clients, and people used to always tell me, oh, word of mouth, and I'd be like, oh God. But doing a good job and being keen to help people with your own, whatever profession you're from, someone needs your help with something, and being able to give them 5 minutes, half an hour of your time, will absolutely come back to you in spades. And to be dead honest, that I'm reaping those rewards right now. There is a lot of inquiry coming in, and I've done nothing. I tried with my industry, advertising doesn't work. The social media side of things, we've had to really kind of invest in a pretty heavy strategy that is going to take a while for it to pay off. So it's free to be a nice person to people and be really helpful, and it does come back to you in one way or the other.
Would you think about doubling down on that approach and maybe implementing maybe a reward structure for those people that you are helping? What's your thoughts around reward structures and incentives that way for your current client base?
I'm totally for them. So because I work with a lot of startups, I work with a lot of bootstrap startups as well, and I know they need cash. You know, one of my clients works in a bar 3 nights a week. And I feel really bad because he's then paying me, and I know he's like, oh, worked in the bar all weekend, I'm up at 7 on Monday again. And yeah, I've offered him that. I've said, I'll give you X% for referral for anything that comes through. And shortly after that, I had a lot of phone calls. So yeah, that's certainly something that we've explored. I try not to do it too much though, because it's just kind of hard to track.
And the type of clients that you do have come in, and for example, do you feel as though you've got to educate a lot of the people based around, also maybe even the presentation that you've given us tonight? Is it a case of do you find yourself going through an education process to your clients, and are they generally quite savvy in terms of what you're offering?
It's most are aware of it. I think they think it's something a little bit more straight and narrow, like, oh, you know, I said in the presentation, like, what tools do you use is a question a lot of people ask me. They're looking for me to say, like, oh, Kiss Metrics. And I'll say, oh, I love Kiss Metrics. But they don't quite understand that once you can take this pullback approach and view the landscape holistically, that things become a lot easier. So it's a little bit of education. But to be honest, what I've started doing now is we do this like agile growth hacking kind of, just handball us your marketing and just stay out of it. Not in a bad way, just like trust us with it. And that basically, you know, we just say we've done this before. This is the return on investment we want to achieve. This is how much it costs. We'll stop working for you if it doesn't achieve a return on investment. And they just go, great, here, take it. So that's a recent development, and it's something it took a long time for me to realize that is very powerful. If you can just, you have to keep trying to find that solution that's just going to provide complete peace of mind with your customers.
Tom, what I saw was that the landscape is so much. What is one thing that everyone here can walk away with as a next step for their own business or startup? How do they start?
So I'll just do a show of hands. How many people in this room, your startup, less than a year, I guess, is the question. So, okay, maybe half to 3/4. It would be, shit, that's a hard one. It would be understand how to sell your vision to your customers in such a way that you can be really agile with your tactics. So there's a difference between strategy and tactics, right? Strategy is we want to go from A to Z. The tactics are we can jump from A to Z, or we can go through the alphabet, or we can go through every third letter in terms of if they're points on a map. Always sell the strategy and be agile with your tactics. So always understand that vision and sell on your vision. I want to do X, Y, Z. I want to create a better a platform that allows you to get a taxi on demand and take you from A to B for cheaper. I don't know, that's a really poor way of explaining Uber, but say that and you can have no idea how that's going to work or how to best communicate that right now to, if you have your early adopters and so on and so forth. But understand that there is a difference and you should always stay true to that strategy, because if you can stay consistent to something, over time you will reap the benefits.
Excellent, thanks, Tom. Would you have a message as well for the audience? Some people may be intimidated by social media or kind of maybe not their strongest point. What kind of tips would you give us to maybe kind of get started, basically?
Just start. I know that's a really kind of it can be a bit of an easy answer, but just start and start trialing. If you start now, and as opposed to in 4 weeks, you have 4 weeks of data, behind you in which to know what works and what doesn't. Just don't try and sell to people. And I know it's a really cliche response, but try and tell a story, try and relate to people, try and engage with people, because the minute you try to sell to them, they will turn off. There are a million other alternatives. I don't care what business you're in, there are a million other alternatives to the product you're selling, and people are going to buy into the story. So don't try and sell to them. Tell your story in such a way that works with them. In terms of getting started, look at your competitors, look at what they're doing well, look at what they're not doing well. Look at video in terms of video and visual content works really well. For some of our bootstrap clients, we just go to Giphy and use GIFs and relate it back into the story. We don't create original content. There's a lot of free content that, when I said content, inspiration is everywhere. It is everywhere, and you will find it if you look for it.
You tend to leverage a lot of tools in that space quite well. Is there any times you've found as though personal leverage in terms of, I don't know, you're in a space at the minute, so you're in the Dream Factory, for example. What resources other than tools do you use to kind of help grow your own business?
In terms of other than tools,
partnerships or maybe
outside of social media, you mean?
Relationships with other businesses, maybe.
Yeah, sure. Sorry. I have a golden rule. Every meeting I have with someone, I try and deliver them immediate value in that meeting, so they can walk away from, whether it's a coffee for half an hour or something else, they can walk away with, oh geez, Tom did this for me. As you do that more and more and more and meet more people, that generally becomes a connection. Oh, you should speak to blah blah. I'll introduce you.
Relationship building.
It's just and that's I just kind of I didn't read that anywhere. It's probably like a tried and true method, but it was a complete revelation to me when I started doing that and the value I got. In terms of like a growth hack in itself, I'd consider that. It's just always try and deliver value to every meeting, because people will remember you as someone who gave them value, even if they say no to you for work or whatever.
What do you think about throwing questions to the audience? I'm sure people have. We'll send the mic out.
Yeah. Lady in the middle.
You say you give them something to take away in every meeting. How do you convert that if you sell a product? Like a lot of these sessions are around information and services.
Yep.
But when you've got a product, like you don't want to give away your product completely for free. So how do you give people some value or give them something when you've got a product?
Do you sell a product right now?
Yeah.
Can I ask what it is?
Clothing.
So it's clothing. So your value doesn't have to be a thing. So it can be like knowledge, for example. Well, I said connections before, but so say in terms of fashion, in terms of if you're speaking to, who would you be meeting with? Maybe like a potential vendor?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, so if I was wholesaling, yep.
Yeah, sure. So you are likely linked into industry events, for example,
Yep.
that they might not be linked into. Telling them about them and pointing them in the right direction, if that is of value to them. For example, this is a very kind of specific example, but something like that, I would still consider value, because that person might go to that event or tell someone else about that event, and they'll remember you for actually doing that. I'm not saying it's going to get a return straight away. You might never get a return on that, but you don't know as well who they know and who they might speak to. So you're already in that meeting. You're trying to sell, obviously, but kind of as a backup, I guess. I think there's things other than, you can't just give everything away for free. But there are other ways of delivering value to people outside of maybe even the discussion. You could be talking about great holiday destinations. Like, it's all about, from my personal experience, and I'm really bad at networking, relationships are so important. Is that helpful?
Well, yeah, it's finding a way to help them with anything, really.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? Yeah,
Yeah.
so they remember you favourably.
Yeah. Well, just be remembered as. Yeah. Just don't be forgotten, I guess, is actually the best way, because you might email them, or in 6 months when you release a new product line. Say you mentioned a holiday thing, and then 6 months later you release board shorts. You go, hey, did you go on that holiday? Is that, like, this is really cliche and corny, but like, I'm like that. But yeah, like, something like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Hope that helps.
We have a question just over here.
As a startup, I guess most people are very concerned with money. And obviously giving work to yourself or like an agency is a bit of a concern just in terms of cost and long term. I completely understand, obviously, you've got the growth, you've got the agile ability to kind of look into many different channels. But at what point do you then kind of bring it back in-house? Or is there a point when you actually suggest to your customers, or maybe even myself as a startup, go, I can actually do that with myself, and I should actually get the skill set myself to do that rather than paying somebody else?
Once you've stopped the exploration phase, once you've figured it out and you can turn it into a process, and if you don't have the money to hire someone to do it, don't try and find investment to make it happen. Learn it yourself. But then once you figure out how to turn it into a repeatable process that you yourself can extradite yourself from, and I work with startups who give it to interns, so they don't pay anything. They just say, hey, can you run our social media? But this is how you do it. And then they can pull themselves away and keep going. You have to understand what works and what doesn't. But if you just you will save yourself a lot of pain by being able to turn that into a process. And we do that. So when we figured out a good way of doing social media, we say, hey, now's the time to take your social media internal, because it's probably more cost effective to do so. So I would say, if you can write it down, I use Lucidchart a lot. It's a Google Drive. It costs like $10 a month or a year or something. It's really cheap. It's a mind mapping tool. It's probably one of the only tools I'm happy to pay for. And it allows me to just really quickly map down processes and then just give it to someone and say, this is what you need to do exactly. So I'd say at that point, but yeah, in the exploration phase, iterate, collect data, figure it out, because then it's so much easier to turn into a process as well. So, you know, processes can be lame if you're on the receiving end of actually having to follow one that's been around for years, but they help a business scale. So.
And just, sorry, one more question is, again, as a startup, obviously there's many different channels and areas that you can kind of go into from a marketing point of view. What would be your top 3 or 4 that you would definitely start with?
In terms of channels?
Channels or media, I guess, in general.
Oh, look, I don't like these questions because everyone's different. Like, for example, I have one client who social media's awesome. Like, we use Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and then we use some remarketing tactics with them, and they work amazingly. Like, it's a really good ROI. With Tiny, they're horrible. It's quite time intensive for us to do that stuff. We're only doing it because we know people are going to look at us and say, well, you said you do social media, but you don't have social media presence. So it's a bit of a cop out of an answer, but there is no silver bullet solution, and you can be creative with it. I would say look at your resources in terms of time and budget and figure out what you can dedicate your time to and what you can afford, and look at every single channel available, because blogging on Medium might be a really, really, really cost-effective strategy for you. Yeah, sorry, not the best answer.
Cool. Thank you very much.
I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, sorry, my throat's not great, so I hope you can understand.
Yep.
I'm second year of startup, and I find it always tricky. Everybody always talks about know your customer, dive deep, know exactly what drives them and all of that. If you're a startup, you have no customers. Until you have that first, you have a hinge, or you have, obviously you've done your business plan, you know who you want to target, you think who would you be your ideal customer, you do that whole avatar stuff and all of that, you do your business plan, and then you start. And you have 0 customers. So how do you build that customer knowledge efficiently and somehow reliably without any customers?
Well, you have customers you intend to sell to, otherwise you won't be able to commercialize.
How do you reliably research them?
We are quite forward with this, and I can share with you the process if you're interested, because I'm trying to figure out how to make it more cost effective, but it's too expensive for startups the way we do it.
Exactly.
But you can do this yourself. We literally find 15 people who fit the bill. Mm-hmm. We've done this for MedTech. We've done it for a co-working space, and we did it for Volley as well. We just find 15 people who fit the bill. So we found people, for example, who didn't sleep so good. We found people who were interested in co-working spaces. We found people who just don't volunteer. And they're quite easy to find because there's a lot of people generally like that. And, I'm working with someone who's, she is basically, it's kind of classified, but I'd basically have to talk to sex workers. And I, hand on heart, have no experience with sex workers. But I'm confident we can find them. Your customers exist even if they're not your customers yet. You need to be able to describe who that person is. You should be able to describe who that person is and go out and find them. Use your networks and speak to them. Speak to them for about an hour and figure out how your business manifests into their lives in terms of what they want to experience. And then just write everything you hear. And then at the end of 15 interviews, you should have about 300 to 400 different statements that someone will provide to you, and then go through it and go, what are they actually all trying to say to me here? That's exactly what we do. We do it in a bit of a structured process, and if you want, I can share that process with you. But yeah, you can. That just costs time on my end. We only charge for time, so someone can do that for free without using us. So there's no tools, there's nothing. It's just time.
All right, can everyone please join me in thanking Tom?